Hey ho, everybody. Welcome back to V'ger Plays, a hateful voyage through the Delta Quadrant. I'm Joseph.
I'm Peter.
Peter, man, I'm really happy today. I'm renewed, I'm refreshed.
Why is that?
The cloud was really tough to get through. That tested my soul.
The cloud was a piece of hot garbage, but I think I had the most fun recording our podcast for the cloud than I did any of our other episodes prior.
Oh, it made for great quality podcasting because there was so much rich content for us to pull from the rotted vine that was the episode.
Made me wonder what the frame of mind for these writers were. And again, you know how important a first season is. Like, what were these guys really shooting for? Was it just a superficial, like, hey, let's bang out some episodes until we get a feel for who these characters are? Or were they really trying to come in deep off the bat? Because sitting there and watching the cloud, and again, the parade of fleshlights that Paris sprung on Kim there, it's like, you don't really have to look hard for this stuff to become horrific. And was there just like no second opinion in this writer's room?
The inconsistency of Voyager writing could not be better typified by what we just watched because of how good it was, which is why I'm feeling refreshed. So our episode today is Season 1, Episode 6, Eye of the Needle. And I don't know about you, spoiler alert, I would consider this by far the best episode that we've watched so far.
Yeah, man, hands down.
No question. I would consider it one of the better episodes of Star Trek, period. For a lot of reasons. And it's almost mystifying to me that this exists in the same continuity as the fucking cloud and the candy corn tragedy and some of the other absolute dog shit that we have been forced to witness.
I agree with you 100%. And, our listener base is starting to grow. I'm seeing a lot of fresh likes coming in on Facebook, a lot of new downloads for the show. And unfortunately, there's some viewers out there who are getting pulled into this black hole with us. I've got some of my friends who never gave Voyager the time of day. And since they started listening to the podcast, they've been digging in on their own, unwarranted. And episodes like this, I think, are good because it's going to justify the amount of time that we're spending on things, the level of thought that we're putting in on it, and hopefully some of the more the viewership engagement that we've been generating.
As much as we do enjoy the hate part of what we're doing and just jamming on how shitty the show can be in so many different ways, it is somewhat life-affirming to get these episodes and we can A, enjoy it, B, talk about something that's good, and then C, get into the happy nitty-gritty stuff.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, let's not forget you and I are both pretty big Trek fans, and it's cool seeing other people out there who are starting to get into it, and yeah, getting past the rough start and some meat and potatoes out of these things.
Although I am somewhat concerned by this revelation that we have so many people who are giving Voyager their first try. I mean, we're not only seasoned Trek fans, we're seasoned haters. We're jaded and cynical, and we're pretty resistant to things disappointing us. You know, it comes with the territory. And some people are not ready for this, I think.
At my deepest core, I fully embrace the schadenfreude of my friends struggling and being in pain. We made the offer for the mailbag at the end of last episode, and I've started to get some feedback. And again, friends of mine who never really gave Star Trek as an IP a really deep chance, and watching them as 30-something-year-olds come into this fresh, whereas, I was a little kid when I started watching this. Is I was taking it as gospel without thinking too deep on it. So there's a lot of critical thinking going into things now that it's enjoyable to watch these people struggle. And I'll bring it up when we get deeper into some of the Doctor stuff here, but I've really realized that Star Trek writers across all of the properties are really the masters of willing fantastic technologies into existence in these universes with doing zero thought into what the implications are and what the real uses should be. And just the big head scratchers, the infuriating head scratchers that come out of it.
You mean like a spore drive?
Listen, man, I finished off. I finished off season 1 of Discovery, and I gotta say, I'm gonna give it a solid B. I know you got to hate for it, and I respect that, but I think you need to give that thing a fair shake. No, like holodecks. We went balls deep on the holographic lung and the ridiculous of that. Like the writers acknowledging that now you can like build holographic constructs into someone's chest cavity. So clearly, holograms wherever you want, and it doesn't matter. And one of my buddies is watching, and he's like, "I'm really putting a lot of thought on the holodecks, and what." Why aren't these entire ships just nothing but deck after deck of holodecks? And I'm like, dude, welcome to the fucking Trek debacle of trying to wrap your head around this stuff. Like, why would you have any sort of ship that wasn't just one big holodeck inside?
They do that in a couple places. Remember Star Trek Insurrection? That's actually a plot point, that there's a holoship that they want to like take all of the Baku, I think they're called, and put them on there while they're sleeping and shit like that.
Yeah.
But I see your point. Well, there's different types of sci-fi. You've got like space fantasy sci-fi like Star Wars. You've got hard, gritty sci-fi that tries to shy away from the science fiction elements as much as possible, like, say, Battlestar Galactica.
Sure.
But Star Trek's supposed to be, okay, it's grounded in reality, sort of. It's a sort of future vision. We're trying to keep this somewhat plausible and feasible while still understanding that we're going to be doing things that aren't necessarily what we would call real in 2018.
I think a lot of times the underlying plot point for technology in Star Trek isn't keeping things grounded or whatever. I think it's, at the end of the day, you're talking about TV shows, and a lot of the technology they bring into play is just financial shortcuts for the TV show. Transporters exist so that the original series didn't have to run through shuttle landing sequences on every planet that they visit. And I think if you just had excessive holodeck use, okay, now my bedroom's turning into part of the bridge or whatever, the galley's turning back into a workstation. But so let me go to the dark place where my friend immediately went here. Nate, we'll call him. He's like, all right, well, if they can just hologram lungs into someone's chest, then, why wouldn't you put amazing security features on a ship where, okay, you've got invaders. Now we're just going to holographically put bullets in someone's brain, or
well, you just start beaming deadly holographic spike traps to just right in front of where the intruder is.
He's like, we keep ragging on the lack of security and locking doors and everything else. Like, maybe if they had some hologram emitters on the bridge, you wouldn't have to care about the doors being unlocked, because if someone comes in that's not supposed to be there, it's like one of those haunted house crushy wall traps start smushing people down.
Just wait, man. It's going to get so much worse with how they bend and eventually break the whole hologram kind of strata of realism and trying to accept this whole concept. I feel like when they start with the Doctor and what they're doing with the Doctor now makes sense, but they just by the end of the run of this series, they are so far off the fucking rails when it comes to holodeck shit that they do get potentially the greatest episode ever involving holodeck technology out of this show, but everything else, it's not good. I think the stuff with the Doctor is cool because it's the whole AI plot line, but kind of a different fork in the road.
I want to get into
about what sentience means, but I guess let's get into the episodes so we can talk about it.
Yeah.
So I guess what's important is to talk about before we launch into the summary proper is that this is the first time I feel like we watched a show where they had a clear narrative focus about what they were going to do. You had the A plot, which is going to dominate most of the screen time, and that involves the finding of a wormhole and things that happen around that. And we see that through 4 specific characters primarily: Janeway, Ensign Kim, B'Elanna Torres, and Tuvok. And Janeway and Kim represent the hopeful and optimistic side of the equation, whereas B'Elanna and Tuvok clearly represent the more doubting or realistic side.
That's a good observation. I didn't really think about that.
They take great pains. Those 4 have most of the dialogue, and they clearly take certain sides as the episode progresses to represent different kind of perspectives. And it was kind of refreshing that I felt and saw that structure, and it really lent to the episode because we don't see any snarf in this.
Yeah.
Tom Paris commits 0 sex crimes and barely has dialogue. Chakotay is reduced to basically saying, yes, ma'am. As far as the A plot goes, we just have those 4 as far as our main crew with dialogue.
You just touched on something I wanted to talk about here for a second. Next Gen was notorious for writing entire characters out for episodes. Like, there was a lot of absence of Deanna Troi in the first season. I'll be curious. I'm going to start paying attention to, are there any main characters completely absent from episodes here? And yeah, this is the first one I can really think of where Snarf's not there. Was there any Starfleet people that we didn't see?
We saw everybody. It's just it was very de-emphasized, except for the 4 mentioned in the A plot. Yeah. The B plot is Cass and the Doctor primarily. We didn't even see Snarf on screen. Yeah. This entire episode. There was 0 Neelix. So more narrative focus helped. And when we opened the episode,
by the way, who posted that damn picture of Neelix on the Facebook group?
Oh, that was me.
What was it?
That was me, the Neelix doll.
The methed out leprechaun, I believe it was referred to as.
Yes, I found that, of course, through Google image search. I was just attempting to find the worst Neelix outfit. I was searching for the actual costumes that he wore so that I could create kind of like a collage image so that we could all go down a terrible memory lane of heroin needles and regret together. And instead I found that. I was like, oh, this is so much better. Let me put this up and traumatize everyone on Facebook at 8:30 in the morning.
Yeah, mission accomplished, buddy.
I don't know who made that, but whoever it is.
I think that was Pinhead from the Hellraiser series that was behind making that specific visual torture.
Someone made that. Someone put the finishing stitch on that thing and said, this is an object I want other people to see because I think they will like it. And
I'm going to bring it to the office and just bother the hell out of everybody.
It's profound mental illness at work. So, but what isn't mental illness is that the Voyager sensors have picked up a wormhole. They deduce very quickly that they have a potential wormhole out there. And the teaser scene is just a couple minutes of them deciding that they're going to go run off and take a look at what this thing is. And their instant excitement that this could possibly be some kind of shortcut or avenue home for them. Clearly, they're on the hunt for something like that, given the background of the stable wormhole to the Gamma Quadrant that was found. So there's at least some reason to believe that they would be able to find something like this, and so they're wasting no time. They get it on sensors and they book it there, even though it's off the beaten path and on a dirt road out there somewhere in the Delta Quadrant.
Sure. The conversation that goes on here that I found interesting was, so you've got your map of the known galaxy, and then you've got your grid over it, separating everything into one of 4 sectors: Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Delta. And the conversation that takes place is there's a 75% chance that this is going to go to one of the quadrants other than Alpha Quadrant. And then Janeway's like, well, I see it as a 1 in 4 chance to have a quick way home. Like, you're talking about something that could go anywhere in the galaxy. I think limiting it down to like 1 out of 4 is very cavalier of you. Like, this thing could put you in the Alpha Quadrant, but like so far away from where you want to, like, you have infinite possibility just way out of whack on this thing.
It could go to another galaxy as far as they fucking know. It's a hole in space. Space is infinite in many directions. It could be a fucking wormhole to the Andromeda galaxy for all they know, and then everyone there has space aids. I mean,
I played Mass Effect Andromeda, and I will tell you right now, the ending is terrible for anybody who goes there. Stay away from Andromeda at all costs.
My wife's going to hear that line, and she's gonna appreciate you more than she already does.
I say that wearing my Andromeda hoodie right now. The other thing, this wormhole, there was another kind of weird fork in the road. Like, so far they've stopped and, as Neelix has pointed out, pulled to the side of the road to investigate every little goofy thing they've come across so far. Because they're all about, exploring while they're out here. But then there's this chance that there's this wormhole, and it's like, we must go home at all costs, redirect course, and any chance of hope to get out of here is worth it. It's weird that you're going to stop and smell the roses every inch of the way, but then try and beeline it to this wormhole because you're in such a rush to get home. Like, it kind of struck out as weird.
I think I understand that they're exploring because they're kind of hoping to find stuff like this as they do it.
True.
So this is more the thing they intend to find when they're going around smelling in all those roses. So that their excitement to find it is natural to me. And I get the whole, making the assumption that the wormhole goes someplace in the Milky Way galaxy, just for the simplicity of the audience. I think trying to open us up to new galactic vistas is probably too heavy a lift. But whatever. They find it, they head off, they close that teaser out quick, and they arrive at that wormhole.
I noticed that along with not getting an HD remake on this, there's no skip intro option on Netflix for Voyager.
Nope, we gotta watch that shit every time.
Yeah. Although
now I just hear it as Ian and Sarah's awesome recorder version now in my head as I watch it, which is, it improves the experience.
True.
The wormhole, when they arrive there, they do the good old Blade Runner enhance.
Classic sci-fi.
Until they find it, and they find that this thing is 30 centimeters wide. It is tighter than a virgin butthole on prom night. It is
30 centimeters for us Americans is 1 foot.
So this thing is tiny. But fortunately, magically, it just so happens that Voyager has apparently 1 foot wide probes called microprobes.
Mm-hmm.
That they can just kind of shoot into this tiny, tiny little wormhole.
You know where they got those micro probes that are used for invading little holes is, I'm sure, the Tom Paris collection in his quarters.
Tom, I understand. I understand that you have a number of illicit sex toys that you enjoy waking your coworkers up to show.
We need to scout this wormhole. Can we borrow one of those jackrabbits I keep hearing things about?
So they shoot the thing in there. Yeah, it starts digging around in the hole, and we get some real Spawn level CGI again. Some real white fire background, real nice. And unfortunately, because it is such a tight fit for the probe, it gets stuck. They're finding out that the wormhole is old, and so they give us a little bit of background that it's probably been collapsing for a very long time, and therefore it is why it has become so small. They can't penetrate. Even Tom's intrepid sex toys are no match for the space waves inside it, and that mini probe gets jammed in there somewhere before it can come out the other end. And as a consequence, they're not really sure.
I think we might have just topped the cloud already.
They need an enema to get that thing out. It gets impacted after too much, trying to just jam it in. That's a real problem. And sometimes you need to grab an enema and bend over and just squirt it in there to get those probes out after.
Mm-hmm. Now's a good time to talk about God.
I didn't know how to follow that up, so thank you.
Let me just bleach it out real quick. I was listening to our last episode when I started saying, there's no mention of religion in Star Trek other than things that don't count as real religions, like Indian magic. I'm listening in the car, and I was like, oh, man, there was that one Star Trek movie where, what does God need with a spaceship? I guess Sarek's brother is probably into the God. Anyways.
Oh, that was Spock's brother. It was Sarek's son.
Yeah.
So you said,
Spock.
yeah. Cybok, yeah. You said it was Sarek's brother.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant to say
Sarek's son.
Sarek's son.
That's okay.
Anyways,
I promise to edit that out so no one else can judge you on your faux pas and Trek lore.
Listen, dude. I'm just trying to scrub your enema probe conversation on my mind. And I'm a little rattled over here.
So they get that thing jammed in there, and there's a bit of hope lost by everyone of. It's a disappointment. We can't see what's on the other side. But Janeway's not giving up. It's part of the dichotomy that comes up in the A plot is Janeway and Kim are on the same wavelength. They want this to work. They want to work this to work. And Janeway's pumping Kim up like, no, don't let it go. Keep trying to get it loose. Keep trying to work it loose. Do not be discouraged. She is really pushing the optimism angle. You would expect it to be Harry Kim because he's the most attached to getting home. That's pretty much the only thing we know about him aside from his memories of the fucking womb.
Yeah.
But Janeway is just as hard in pushing, we need this to work. And Tuvok continues to counsel caution, but Janeway's not having it.
Really, now that I'm thinking about it, Kim and Janeway are the only two people that they've really shown out of the main crew who have any like super intent interest in getting back into the Alpha Quadrant. Like Chakotay doesn't seem to give a shit. None of the Maquis really seem to give a shit that we've seen so far. Highlighted even further by the fact that the Starfleet captain keeps thwarting their best efforts to get home, and they haven't mutinied yet. And then Paris doesn't give a shit because he's going back to jail. Tuvok, I think, is like the black sheep of his family and hides his security shame in the Delta Quadrant. But yeah, so they keep working on that. And then where do we go in the episode?
So after that, we actually get our first shot of the B plot, which is the Doctor B plot. So it's the sports bro that's in there for tearing his fucking rotator or whatever, or his hand, broke his hand, something like that, some sports injury. And they make a real point of having this officer talking to Kes about what happened, and then referring to the doctor who is in the room assisting in treating his wound as if he's not a person. He's there, and he's acknowledging his presence, but as more of an object than as a person.
Not only does he dismiss him, I think there's some very clear distrust of him when they start talking about surgery procedures and stuff like that. Like, well, I don't know if I would be willing to let this guy operate on me. And I thought it was odd that people in the 24th century, with the level of integration with technology that they have, would call to question a holographic, just technology having a real deep hand in surgical procedures and more invasive stuff like that.
It made sense to me for one reason from TNG. Do you remember the episode where they find that derelict... Yeah, sure you do. That derelict 100,000-year-old ship, and they have the whole Leia Brahms, Geordi holodeck think tank thing?
Yes.
Do you remember at the end of the episode the incredible hesitance everyone had at the idea of the computer steering the ship?
I hadn't really thought about that. That's a strong observation. I'm going to have to go back and rewatch that.
The idea of the computer driving the ship for them is something that seems to be anathema to everybody. And it suggests to me that in the Star Trek universe, somewhere in some series Bible maybe, or canon, there's a separation that people are making from what people should be doing versus what artificial intelligence should be doing. Now, we've never seen that expressed explicitly, but when I saw that, it reminded me of that episode of maybe this is why. And because this guy isn't the only one that is going to treat the Doctor poorly in this episode.
I'm going to save all my Doctor AI comments for the soup scene a little later on, but you're onto some strong stuff here. I do want to give a special shout out to Kes's wig or hair or whatever is going on there. She is looking pretty good at this point. Her space elf style is coming together great. She no longer looks like a rogue Q-tip. My commendation to the makeup and hair department.
Yeah, we seem to be firmly at real hair levels with her now. Yeah, they got her in that blue dress uniform thing. Yeah. Looks good. Like they've improved her look tremendously from pageboy haircut, wig, dirtied up episode 1 Kes. So quick improvement there. And of course Kes is the one who's the outsider, the naive outsider who's pointing out how the Doctor is being othered to the Doctor, who essentially accepts it. And says, well, that's just the way things are. People are going to treat me like shit, which she doesn't want to accept, of course, because that's her character. But the Doctor, at first, he's othered and he's obviously irritated by it, but he doesn't seem to have any desire to try and change that on his own.
Yeah.
We transition back to the A plot after that, and we get into the fact that the probe has been detected by someone on the other side of the wormhole. So they can't get it loose, just like they feared, but someone's scanning it. And so they are excited at this prospect. There's someone over there. So they start scrambling about potential ways to communicate with whoever is scanning it.
Seems so risky, man. My butt hole clenched when they started with this stuff.
How so?
You're out there solo. You don't know where this wormhole goes. It could be the Kmart Klingons on the other. Like, they're getting ready to, like, basically bleed their heart out to whoever's willing to listen and, feed them the line about how help us, we're lost in space and this and that. Like, as soon as they start with the communication subplot in this with the mystery other side, the whole time I'm just expecting the audio to clear up and be like, we are the Borg, get ready to be assimilated, motherfuckers, because here we're coming for you now.
I guess, given where they are in the galaxy, you never expect them to bring out the Borg quite yet, because that's going to be a thing later.
I know it's in there somewhere. I don't know where they're going to introduce it. I don't know. When you're so exposed like that, I guess I'd be a lot more risk averse if I was a captain in this situation, but whatever. So they start talking, they clean up the communication issues, and they get a doubting Thomas on the other end who does not believe that they are from the Delta Quadrant as they claim to be, because that is preposterous, and he chalks it up to people basically pranking him.
Skipped ahead a little bit, and there's a couple things I wanted to maybe look at. There's a scene between Harry and B'Elanna where we establish something that you already mentioned, which is that the Maquis people aren't seen to be in a hurry to get home.
Yeah.
Get a little background on B'Elanna's life. That of the half and half of Klingon human, it's her dad who's the human and her mom who's the Klingon. They are not together. And B'Elanna does not get along with either of them. Apparently her dad left her, B'Elanna and her mom, and she doesn't talk to her mom anymore, so broken home situation, and she's just not giving a shit about getting home, and therefore this is more a science experiment for her at the moment, and she's not all that excited about the prospect of this work.
I would say B'Elanna looks like she is at the most 1/4 Klingon and 3/4 human. Now, if her mom's human, or her mom's Klingon, her dad's human, I would say that using her as a genetic specimen, and Alexander Rozhenko, what was Worf's baby's mama's name?
Kalar? Yeah, Kalar was half human, half Klingon. She looks relatively similar to what B'Elanna's got.
Do you think it bothers the Klingons that when there's crossbreeding, that human genetic traits just seem to clobber the shit out of the Klingon ones?
Well, I think if we look at Enterprise, have you ever watched any Enterprise? That's not a conversation we've had.
No.
Actually get the
fuck out of here. How are you going to sit there and tell me you're watching Enterprise and you won't give Discovery a shake?
Because Discovery's not Star Trek, but we'll get into that some other time. But in Enterprise, they actually do episodes to canonically explain why it is that Klingons look so human-like, or as Voltaire would say, Puerto Ricans dressed in gold lame in TNG, or not in TNG, in TOS. And there's definitely like a resentment towards the Klingons that wind up looking very human in universe. So you would expect probably the same thing for halvesies, if you will.
Sure.
But they have that conversation, and they get that whole plot going with being able to start the communication. And sure enough, they get someone on the other line who seems very hesitant to believe that they're in the Delta Quadrant. But importantly, whoever that is in the Alpha Quadrant. So this little tight virgin butthole with that's probe just jammed in there from the Tom Paris sex experience, this may be a ticket home somehow. At least some kind of message or some communication could be established if they can convince whoever that is that they're legit.
Once he acknowledged that he was in the Alpha Quadrant, I took a bet on what species it was going to be.
I don't think that he says that he's in the Alpha Quadrant. They identify that's where his transmission came from, and then they tell him.
Sure, but I had a sinking suspicion as to what he was going to be, and I ended up being right. But before we get any deeper on that, there's Janeway at her desk, and then who rolls up on the ready room?
It's Cass and her real hair.
And the line And the line out of Janeway's mouth is like, "Kess, what a surprise to see you here." And it's like, why would it be a surprise, dude? You let these aliens everywhere.
Like, she comes in and she apparently got a hot diet tip from Tom Paris to drink, what was it, fucking spinach juice or some fucking nasty ass sounding shit. And it helps herself to a cup of that while Janeway has some soup. And
Oh, from where?
from the Replicator, my man.
From the fucking Replicator. Let's move back over to Star Trek Replicator, the Chronicles of Replicator. I'm all over the place on this. You have gradually, episode after episode, had less and less Replicator usage. You almost just got the fucking ship destroyed by Space Nebula Baby over your coffee thing to try and get some antimatter or whatever. She rolls right up to that Replicator like it ain't no thing and makes up, spinach juice with a touch of, I don't know, ginger or something, and then orders like fucking vegetable soup that she proceeds to drink like tea. Like, what?
We even get the Replicator effect. I mean, they're not beating around the bush. We get that whole, here's this matter forming up, a special effects shot. But they sit down, they have their nasty fucking...
She might as well have been like, fuck the rations and fuck Neelix's shitty cooking.
Or you
I'm going to that Replicator.
We should have seen like, I don't want to eat any Neelix's spicy ass space rat. I'm going to have some soup. But,
space rat. What they should have said was, we're going home here in about 5 minutes. I guess I can just go ape shit on this Replicator again.
Time for creme brulee. But they sit down and Cass just goes right for it and says... everyone's treating the doctor like garbage. It's bullshit. Why is that happening? And Janeway straight up does not consider the doctor a person. The doctor is a technological tool, and she's actually kind of angry that the doctor has no bedside matter, and they're probably just going to go in there and reach into his holographic brain and reprogram him so he's not as much of a dickhead. So we don't get much empathy at first shot from Janeway about Cass's concerns about the doctor, because she obviously is of the mind that the doctor is just a extension of the computer and not a person.
Here's my big conversation diversion here, and is the doctor AI? And I say that from a standpoint of Mass Effect, which I'm a big fan. One of my favorite things in Mass Effect that they introduce, just background thought, is the concept of artificial intelligence versus what they would refer to as virtual intelligence. And artificial intelligence is sentient, preserves its own life, and makes independent thought. And then you've got a lot of stuff that you can interact with seamlessly, the virtual intelligence, but really it's just an interface for a database that's there to present information and perform functions.
I think it's important to note also in Mass Effect that artificial intelligence is seen as abhorrent and restricted, while virtual intelligence is integrated into technology and is accepted. And therefore, the difference between the two is very relevant, and it becomes a very big story point, particularly in the second and third games, as an artificial intelligence character, for lack of better term, becomes important to the story.
Yes. I would argue that the ship's main computer, the interface, we get the LCARS audio and all that stuff. I mean, that's pretty obviously to me a virtual intelligence.
I would agree that the Majel Barrett voice computer, like the normal Starfleet 24th century computer, is a virtual intelligence. However, here's where I'm going to go deep into my headcanon on this, and I don't know where you are, but this has always been my thought, that in particular, as we saw technology progress through TNG and now into Voyager, where we have neurogel packs that are increasing computer capacity, that computer capacity has increased at that exponential rate far enough that while the virtual intelligence interface into the computer is exactly that, it is sophisticated enough to accidentally create what we would call artificial intelligence, because the computers are powerful enough to be able to construct and simulate the necessary connections to deliver on a request that does that. And we saw that initially in the Moriarty episodes that we've already referenced from TNG, where an accidental sentence from LaForge creates Moriarty as I would say an artificial intelligence that displays sentience, consciousness, a desire to protect its own life, an ability to act independently of the virtual intelligence that created it. And the Doctor, as I think a lot of sophisticated holo programs that we see in DS9 and in Voyager as well, I think meet the threshold of being artificial intelligence.
So what makes Data a big deal? Because you have several potent examples of true artificial intelligence. Most of them are if we're going to consider these hologram people, these holodeck people to be AIs in certain cases. There was the nanites. I want to say there was a couple other things. Usually it was TNG episodes with, some AI getting loose and commandeering the ship and causing problems. My buddy Nate also pointed out, we keep going back to the door lock issues, that there might be this innate fear of the ships taking over and running amok and trapping people and decompressing things. And maybe that's why you don't see a lot of door locks actually being used, was fear of Skynet rising or whatever. But, what makes Data such a big deal? Is it that he's a functional, self-contained android, or is it that he was the first example of AI, developed by a Federation affiliate? Or
well, he's not the first example of AI. There was examples of AI in TOS episodes. The Nomad probe, for example, or V'ger from the movie that we named the show after. So I think 8-8 is a big deal because he's a fully functional man-built android that clearly, as they establish, shows all of the affectations of true intelligence and therefore grows in that fashion as an independent unit and is something that man built for that purpose. And I guess this is one of those untread grounds in Star Trek. Despite all of the hundreds of episodes of the show, we never have a firm direction on how the Starfleet really feels, or the Federation really feels, about artificial intelligence, aside from a couple court scenes on individual bases.
And that was those court scenes were more establishing that he was sentient and he was a life form, not what separates him and from the other elements that we're talking about here. And if I can go kind of off on a further tangent here just for a second, I keep thinking, what's the character flaw? What is the big, the motivate? Just trying to wrap my head around what is humanity in the 24th century? Why are they obsessed with exploration? I mean, that really seems to be the primary drive of Starfleet. You cut out all the wars and stuff, the reactive things that they're forced to be, and you look at what they are proactively, and it's these explorers. You could have spaceships that the computers completely operate by themselves, and basically they could run the Enterprise D with one person. They choose to have these crews and these families and all these other this desire to get out there and explore. I think life is too comfortable in the 24th century. I think that at their core they've grown soft and there's no innovation. Time and time again, especially in Voyager, you've got this limited pool of resources and what I would call a pretty middle of the road crew. You're not dealing with really the best of the best here. This isn't a flagship. This is a group that you're sending out to go after Maquis terrorists. Yet they're able to overcome problems in a matter of minutes or hours or days that the Federation scientists at large couldn't. And I think it's not that the Federation scientists couldn't, it's that they don't have to. And that there's a real stifled innovation in humanity because they've accomplished so much. There's no drive, there's no duress to really push people to have to improvise and come up with some radical solutions.
I think that a lot of what you say is true. That it would be interesting to have more of a meditation on what living in a utopian society does. We get small bits from characters in different parts of Trek canon. Picard talking about how people in the 24th century work to better themselves. We get an episode later in Voyager where we meet a side character for a single episode as a crew member who has multiple degrees in advanced scientific principles, but kind of works in this menial job on Voyager, just because it gives them the opportunity to do the experimentation with their free time that they want to be able to do. There's an idea of people wanting the to do something with their lives, because otherwise what are they going to do except sit in opulence and unlimited everything they could possibly want. And it never gets explored, really. And I think the show would be uncomfortable in exploring it, simply because once you start going down that road, I don't think there's any coming back. Once you open up that box, it's a dark place to go. So they just don't go there.
So to circle this back around to this discussion about the Doctor and his role on the ship, you've got this emergency holographic Band-Aid, which has already been used beyond its intended purpose, and it's now becoming a part of the crew, as Kess is pointing out. It's capable of a lot more, and if it's gone from being what I think was supposed to be a virtual intelligence, and it's now starting to crest onto an artificial intelligence. And this was designed by this Zimmerman guy back in Starfleet, and I want to say that Barclay had some part in his programming too, if I remember correctly. Like,
we're gonna see them again.
Like, why would you not? If you've gone to all the program, to the difficulty to make this program, you're telling me you wouldn't just have this thing just running in your office for a couple months with you hanging out and interacting and like working the bugs out? You wouldn't realize that this thing's going to achieve sentience at some point on its own? Like,
I think this is just one of those high-level writing issues. I'm not going to put this on the Voyager writers. I'm not even put this on Star Trek writers as a whole. There are certain logical paths that they can't go down in episodic 90s sci-fi TV.
Fair enough.
We're in that deep Mass Effect, Battlestar Galactica, getting into the fucking nitty-gritty about philosophical questions level with our discussion. It's good that we do, because we can, but I understand why they can't go down this road. And I think it's interesting enough that they show that Janeway just sees the Doctor as a piece of equipment. And she swiftly switches tactic after Kess doesn't let up and says he's alive and he needs to be treated with respect. And Janeway takes a step back and says, okay, tell you what, I'll go see what I can do for him. And that wraps that scene. She leaves with her nasty pickle juice or whatever, and we get back to the A plot. We know that the voice on the other end is Romulans at this point, and they're trying desperately to raise them back on voice communications, and we get Janeway after hours. We get Janeway with her woken up by word that they've got the Romulan ship back on voice communications, and Kate Mulgrew is looking foxy as hell in her nightgown and perfect bed hair.
Is that the words you want to use? Because in my notes, I believe I said Janeway's hair looks like mid-90s Marvel comic hair. If I don't know any better, I would say that there is two life forms laying in that bed. One is Captain Janeway, and the other is something stuck to her head.
It looks like soap opera hair. It's just like it's just this perfect puffed out flowing red locks.
It's 6 people worth of hair. It's crazy.
It's a lot of hair. You wonder if she's got some sort of like weird sort of space physics going on when she ties that thing up in the morning. But rolling around in her nightgown, looking sharp.
So she gets a message that they got this dude back on the horn, and she starts negotiating and trying to roll some diplomacy on him from her quarters. And this guy is not really feeling the story that she's laying down. For some reason, the ship being in the Delta Quadrant and broadcasting a signal through a wormhole just seems like complete poppycock to this guy. And I'm scratching my head. I'm like, how could anybody doubt anything in space? Because if there's one thing I've learned from Star Trek, it is that anything is clearly possible. Nothing is too zany. And if you are in a spaceship, the sky's the limit. And it circles me back around to like, oh, how could how could a ship being knocked to the Delta Quadrant by some malevolent force be impossible? I'm telling you, man, Starfleet covers this shit up. Every space accident, every weird entity with a godlike running with a godlike entity, They are closing the books. They are getting out the black magic markers, and they are censoring the fuck out of this stuff.
I like your headcanons about both terrorism and the fact that space travel is like more Lovecraftian than the Federation lets anyone know. And they paint this picture of it being this idyllic utopia exploration mission thing.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll actually get people to sign up. But in reality, they face dark horrors and insanity. It's nice. But I think really I can chalk this up to Romulans being naturally suspicious of everything.
And that's why I love it.
I mean, that's a race. So that's a racial trait that they establish long before this, and they're carrying it forward. And I buy it on that level. And I actually also in this scene, I really liked all of Janeway's non-verbals. Like Kate Mulgrew really like is clearly into making this guy understand, and it's reflected in her words, but she does a lot of nonverbals. She goes around her quarters, sits on things, thinks about things, speaking to the voice above, like pleading. They do a great job of helping her as an actress play out her emotions as much as she's able to also express them in dialogue.
Very convincing body language for the guy who can only hear her.
The Romulan voice we're hearing also good. The actor they got to play this guy, we get to see him in the next scene because they figure out how to do a little talk. They got to overcome some phase variance. They talk about how there's something going on with this wormhole that's making it difficult to get the visual.
Google Duo and make sure everybody's running the same version.
But they get it going. They get that Google Hangouts online, and we get our visual with the Romulan. He's super Romulan. He's got the face ridges and he's got the green skin. And
I got a Kevin Nealon vibe from him.
Nealon?
I think if Kevin Nealon from SNL was a Romulan, it would be this guy.
I honestly don't even know who that is.
Man.
Yeah, I know. You made a reference and it's like, boom. SNL? Like what year? Is that a current staff member? I don't know who that is.
Yeah, it was like the God damn it. Adam Sandler era.
Yeah, I honestly if it happened on SNL and it was after 1985 but before 2008, I'm probably not going to know except from the big stuff. I'm sorry.
Well, okay, Kevin Nealon looks like this Romulan if he wasn't a Romulan. Let me put it in perspective that way.
Well, Kevin Nealon, the Romulan, whoever that is, Romulan is on there, and Captain Janeway is doing everything in her power to convince this guy, we are legitimately stranded in the fucking Delta Quadrant. Please, God, help us. And they work him down by bringing up his family, talking about how he hasn't seen them since he's on this mission. He hasn't seen her.
Vessel, right?
It's a science vessel. He hasn't seen his daughter since she was born, and the feels are happening. My wife said that this episode shouldn't be called Eye of the Needle. It should be Eye of the Feels, because this scene, they really get the emotion turned up. In both the Romulan starting to crack and Janeway just pleading with this guy, not begging, but going full speed ahead at that barely restrained level of, you have to understand, you may be our only hope of letting the people that we love know that we're still alive. And it's good. It's a great scene.
It is good. And then she starts, first it's, hey, let us forward over a bunch of emails that we want you to forward into Federation space so our guys know that we're alive. And he's like, whoa, look, I'm not authorized to do this. She's playing that, for the love of God, be compassionate card. This dude, on the other hand, it's like, look, lady, I don't think you understand how the Romulan Senate works and what my role as a nobody is and what happens to people who step too far a line in this part of the galaxy. Like the Romulans are not big on freedoms and that kind of stuff. So it was a potent scene of diplomacy on her end.
I think to the credit of the actor who played the Romulan captain, it would be easy to deliver that dialogue and come off like a dick. But it's a lot harder to deliver that dialogue and come off as like, I get where this guy's coming from. Yeah. And he does. He does it in a way of like, listen, I'm with you. You're all y'all in a bad situation, but I cannot put my foot on this gas any further without making people notice me in a way that I may not enjoy. And he's good. I don't know who the actor is. I'm gonna have to look it up later.
It's Kevin Nealon. He's from SNL.
Oh, okay, yeah. I'll have to check him out on YouTube. I'm sure he's hilarious. Yeah. In between this and the night scene, there was a quick part of the B plot where Janeway goes down and talks to the doctor, and they have a scene where he's basically recounting to the captain that he's treated like a piece of furniture, and in a way that is, he expresses the disrespect that's being done to him, and it obviously bothers him. And Janeway eventually just kind of comes out and says, is there anything that I can actually do for you, Toaster? And it's uncomfortable for her. She plays it that this is weird. Like, she's asking her microwave if there's anything that it needs. And the doctor doesn't quite know what to do with that. Comes back with the idea of, I'd like to have more control over when I get turned off. And Janeway suggests that maybe they can give the doctor the ability to turn himself off if he wants to be off.
So the EMH main character motivation that he has had up to this point is that essentially his existence is pain for this guy. He's like the Meeseeks from Rick and Morty. If he is corporeal, then it is a bad time for him. And his driving goal in any situation is to knock out what's in front of him and be turned off. And her hesitation, when she, like you just pointed out, like her talking to this EMH like a person and not like a light switch. There was a Next Gen episode where someone asks for something from the Replicator and then says thank you to the Replicator, and I believe it's a Geordie like, why do you say thank you? It's such an alien concept, and it's funny now as we move into this world of smartphones, AIs, Google Homes, Alexas, and that other stuff. I catch myself sometimes wanting to say thank you to someone who, the voice that's just provided me with information, and I'll be curious to see which way humanity really goes. Staying polite with technology or just treating it like a doormat.
The doctor's the way Robert Picardo plays the emerging thought that he actually has once, and he processed this idea that there could be things that he wants aside from doing his job. The way that he takes an obvious great deal of pleasure in teaching Kess is played with a kind of subtlety that I have grown to appreciate from him so far in the series. Consistently, his scenes have been the best scenes, even in bad episodes.
Yes.
And in this a good episode, he continues to deliver. I really liked that scene. I liked his sort of uncertainty to what to do with the question, yet still having an answer. And as much as Kate Mulgrew playing Janeway's uncomfortable revelation that she's asking a toaster what it would like to do for breakfast.
Yeah. So that was a real solid development scene there. And then while they're having that chat, Torres does some work and finds out that the signal that they're sending this audio along and using this microprobe as like the bridge through this wormhole, that they can go further with it.
Did they have almost a straight up Jean-Luc scene? That coffee commercial moment happens almost again where they just get super hype with each other.
It's the first time that we've seen Torres actually excited about any of this, because now we're not talking about passing letters to people who might not be there. We're talking about using this microprobe as a relay and being able to send a transporter signal across.
It is where we go from the dichotomy between Torres and Tuvok being more cynical and Kim and Janeway being more positive and hopeful, to everyone the hope is starting to grow for everybody. Like, everyone's buying into, oh man, maybe we can just go home. We get another quick doctor scene where Kess comes in and relays that information to the doctor that there could be a way for them to get home, and he has this very dour and gut punch moment where he just tells Kess, can you just make sure I'm turned off if you all leave so that I'm not here, alone?
Here's the dark part of that. I think if they're going to beam out and essentially abandon ship to relocate through it, like, they're going to use the auto destruct thing and just fucking blow that up so Federation technology isn't just floating adrift.
You're right. I mean, they never really address it since they continue to move the episode forward, so they never dwell on what's going to happen to the Doctor again. And then we all know that the transportation plan is doomed to failure.
Man,
just because the show doesn't end.
got some blood in the water on this thing. Like, I love industrial accidents. That's like one of my many sick passions.
Okay. Do go on. I mean, I talked about, jamming a probe into a virgin butthole in space, but no, tell me about how you like industrial accidents.
You want to run some good reading, man? Get on Wikipedia and look up a list of industrial accidents. There's some really, really excellent nuclear disasters out there. One of my favorite was, I think it was in Boston, like a molasses storage facility burst and like the streets just filled complete with molasses and like killed a bunch of people blob style. Like,
Jesus.
Yeah, there's... We'll do a whole podcast on industrial accidents. I'll take you guys down a real trip. But anyways, because of that, I love transporter accidents in Star Trek. They're cool. I like seeing people get turned inside out or rocks and bulkhead fused in them. And they start talking about transporting people across this rickety ass bridge, and like my mouth is like salivating for like some really good disaster sequences to take place here. They con this guy. They're like, hey, let us send over this test cylinder that, is going to basically serve as a proof of concept before we even talk about doing people. And I thought it was real ballsy of this captain. I don't know how big this ship is.
They give the impression that he may be out there alone or close to alone, because when they bring up the idea, the test cylinder works, and when they bring up the idea of like, hey, can we kind of roll over to your ship now? He's like, whoa. No, can do, pal. But I can bring in a troop ship or something, and we can get you guys all stowed away on something else.
Well, they go to transport this test cylinder, and like they're not transporting it back to his like transporter room or a cargo bay, or whatever. He's sitting on the bridge, and they're transporting this thing like no shit 5 inches away from this guy's face.
Well, I guess at this point he's got the trust has been built.
I know, and the trust is there.
They don't want to build another set, so they got the bridge look for the view screen. They're gonna save some money.
What they're talking about doing is like one of those YouTube videos where someone's like up in the stands in some sporting arena, and they're like throwing a football into a red Solo cup, and it's like, yeah, like that's essentially what they're doing here. Like, this is the most Hail Mary of all transports. And yeah, okay, sure, let's try this thing. And we're talking about like pinpoint accuracy required on this. Go ahead and put it right next to my fucking face. That's sure. What's the worst that could happen? I've always wanted a cylinder sticking out of my fucking head.
Well, it does work. And
sadly, my dreams were thwarted here.
And this guy who's a scientist, so I kind of buy his enthusiasm for all of this, says, okay, we got to try it on a person now, so beam me to you. And so our next shot is the Romulan captain being beamed to the to Voyager from the Alpha Quadrant, and they do a lot of technobabble. Oh, we got this phase variance, we got to adjust for this, but we're gonna make this happen. And so they're doing the transporter surgery to get this guy over, and Peters is drooling at the idea that we're gonna have like a horrible death scream, or the guy's gonna come through as a inside out or something. But lo and behold, they pull him through, and he's there in all of his terrible Romulan garb glory.
Love it. And again, this is why this is a great episode. Is there's going to be a failure somewhere here. There's 7 seasons of this. They're not going to succeed. And I thought they did such a good job building the tension. Like, you don't know was that cylinder, because they really explained what that cylinder was in depth. Like, was that cylinder going to cause some problem and explode? Was this guy going to die in his transport in? Was he going to die on his transport out? Were other people going to die? Like, what point is failure going to strike? And they held it to the very end, man. They did a great job with this.
They did. They kept building that tension that something was going to go wrong. And just when you thought things are working out, what happens here? Tuvok's got his tricorder out. He's scanning the guy.
No, first he's got his phaser out. Tuvok's a fucking killer, man. Like,
I think he got his. I'll have to recheck. I remember him getting.
Oh, he holsters his phaser and then draws the tricorder out. Like, this guy,
and
he's an animal.
He scans his oven mitt outfit and says, "Hey, quick question. What year is it?" And Romulan's real freaking confused. Like, what the fuck do you mean? What year is it? It's by your reckoning 2351. And then
Surprise!
Everyone, it's another temporal plot. You've won. You know, like, you've won disappointment. Everyone is crushed as they all realize this guy is from 20 years in their past, and that this phase variance they've been detecting is that this wormhole is not just a hole in space, it's also a hole in time. And so they've got a new set of problems. They bring the party to the conference room, and they start talking to him, and they start talking about their options. And they run through the temporal prime directive issue that they clearly cannot go back to 20 years in their past. Now, mind you, Harry Kim is all for it. He's like, fuck it, get me the fuck out of the Delta Quadrant. But Janeway shoots it down. We can't go back. That would cause huge changes in the timeline if a bunch of people from 20 years in the past showed up. They talk about the idea that perhaps the Romulan captain could warn the Starfleet not to send Voyager out on its mission. And Chakotay, of all fucking people, who is the bounty hunt target of that mission, is like, nah, you can't do that either, because we've had such a huge impact in this quadrant. And that was the only line of dialogue where I just balled my fist and wanted to punch something.
This whole scene, and I get it, you know, you can't, whatever time. But they just roll out, like you just said, the worst reasoning possible for why this guy can't do anything to prevent this major disaster, to prevent all these Starfleet people who just died on the, you know, the transport, you know, the incident, the first officer, all of the medical staff. Like, these lives just mean nothing because a ship that wasn't even supposed to be there in the first place saved a couple candy corns from a situation. Let's back up here for a second.
They don't even know they did that. Remember?
Yes. Let's back up. This is season 1, episode 6. This is now the third time conundrum episode. One half of Voyager so far has been involved in some sort of weird temporal loop bullshit. Like, whatever good they think they've done, half of that could be completely negated because it's a time situation.
Let's go through it, okay? All right, so let's put the premiere aside for a second.
Okay.
Episode 2, Parallax. It's our own fuck up. We're through the looking glass. The next episode, Time and Again, they don't remember it happened.
Sure.
Episode 4, Phage. Neelix gets a lung stolen, and they meet space Nazis who want to steal their organs. Okay.
No big impact there on life.
Episode 5, they accidentally hurt a space amoeba and have to fix it by fucking up their own ship, okay? That's the impact they've had aside from the premiere, which is when they Janeway stuck them in the Delta Quadrant by deciding that Mayfly space elves were more important than their own well-being, and she couldn't find an interesting or novel way to blow the station up after sending them home, and therefore decided to get involved with their fight with the Kmart Klingons. That's it. That's the only thing they've actually done in the Delta Quadrant that fucking matters.
And the one thing that they actually did was against the Prime Directive. They inserted themselves into foreign affairs that they should not have, and that's what we've been really crucifying her on, was the fact that she didn't stick to the Prime Directive there. So their only leg to stand on here for why they can't withdraw is because they violated the Prime Directive once. Undoing that should be like, yeah, we shouldn't have really done that in the first place, so let's just back out.
Yeah, they've only been in the Delta Quadrant for weeks at this point, maybe a couple months. So I know the Temporal Prime Directive, I don't think has a time limit on it. You're not supposed to ever fuck with the past. But this is close enough that if you're willing to break the Prime Directive to save the Ocampa, then why the fuck aren't you willing to bend the rule a little bit to get yourselves out of the mess you've made?
And this Romulan's playing ball, too. This Romulan,
yeah, he's all for it. He's like, I'll fucking help you out. You guys are all kinds of fucked up. Let's do some shit about this.
No, but
he's
once they start talking about like endangering the time-space continuum, he's like, yeah, I don't want to do anything to, weaken the Romulan Star Empire. Like, he's playing along, and it got me to thinking that humanity, the Federation, encountered so many opportunities to like impact timelines and go to the past. Like, and every time we see it, the people involved in this time fuckery are so conscious of what could happen, and they do the right thing every time. Do you think for a minute that these other species are playing ball? Like, all right, I'll give it to the Romulans. They're cautious. They're smart people. They're crafty. They know that, they're playing with fire. You think the fucking Klingons care? Do you think the...
Well, I mean, this is the basis of the entire temporal Cold War plot in Enterprise.
I didn't watch Enterprise again, but like, do you think the Borg would not take the opportunity to fuck around and give himself a hookup back in time? Do you think the Pac-Led, if the Pac-Led had a chance to go back and like know the lottery numbers, that they're not going to be... So really, how fragile is the time-space continuum? They treat it like this glass egg all the time in the Federation, but...
Everything you're talking about is a huge plot line in Enterprise, believe it or not. The first couple seasons of the show are about species and political groups that master time travel fucking with time against each other, and that's what that's about. So another reason for you to watch Enterprise, my friend. This is a thing they do.
I'll have to do some research. I don't know. I'm prepared for this conversation.
Okay, sorry. I know Enterprises might as well be. If this Voyager's something you need to give the time of day I know Enterprise might as well be a black hole to you. So they end up coming back around to, okay, well, we don't have any other good options, so we're back to our original request. Romulan Captain, sir, they don't know his name yet, by the way. Would you, after we have left on our mission, be willing to then send our messages after we're lost and therefore no longer can impact what's going on, to let our families know? And he immediately agrees. He said, I would be happy to do that.
The most compassionate Romulan ever.
He gives them his real name. Finally, he says it's Telecromor. He's from the Romulan Astrophysicist Society, and he says, well, I'm gonna deliver your messages. And by the way, if you make it back in 75 years, I'm a Romulan. I live forever. So look me up. I'd like to know that you made it home. And so he is 100% on board. You see the scene in the transporter room where they give him the messages and send him back. You get the swelling, happy music of mission complete, and they send him back successfully. There's no industrial accident at all.
Again, nail biter. I'm like, this guy has to die on this last turnaround. Like, they've endeared this character to you. He's come through where you couldn't think Romulans could possibly have a heart. This is where this guy like makes it out to the other side as a pile of quivering goo and rib cage.
But he makes it. He makes it, and the show seems primed and ready to say, okay, little accomplishment done. One more piece of the puzzle towards Voyager getting home has been put together. Good job, team. But what happens, Peter? What happens?
Party pooper Tuvok coming in well after the ability to influence the situation and tells Janeway, oh, hey, by the way, this little Timmy dipshit nobody scientist from Romulus, turns out we have a record of him for some reason, and oh yeah, he dies like 4 years before we leave.
I love the way the reveal comes down, because all of the music and the shots in the scene, if you've watched Star Trek before, you think this is over. They are using the production kind of beats we're used to make you think, all right, we're done here. And right at the end, Tuvok comes in and says, I have one more thing to add now that he's gone. And she starts explaining that he looked him up in the database, and the music changes, it gets a little dark, and the expression on Janeway's face when they zoom in is she already knows what he's going to tell him, and she is crushed. You can see it on her face, like, oh, motherfucker, please do not tell me what you're about to tell me. And he lays it out that he died 4 years before they left. And Kim goes nonverbal. He just slumps into his station. He is killed. And it's B'Elanna and Tuvok who are now trying to convince Kim and Janeway that things are going to be all right. Maybe he passed it off in a will. And they flip what they started as those two are the doubters and the other two are the optimists. Now the other two have resigned themselves to defeat. And now they're like, wait, maybe it worked out. But everyone knows this probably didn't work out. They really needed to work this Romulan dude to get him to do this. And there's probably no way that if he died before they left, that there's any hope that those messages.
If I was Janeway, I'd have come right over the table and kicked Tuvok in his fucking mouth. Like, I want to say that this is not the first time like he's withheld some pretty beefy info, and you're the captain. You need to be playing the game with all the cards on the table. If you knew that this guy was going to die, like he could have pulled Janeway off at the side and been like, hey, quick heads up, this guy dies 4 years before we take off. So we need to like really stress that he has some sort of contingency. And it'd be like a normal conversation point, but like, hey, you know, we appreciate you doing all this. This is a big deal. We're definitely gonna look you up just in case, you know, something crazy happens and you slip in the bathtub. Could you make sure your daughter or like, you know, your Romulus lawyer has a copy of this just in case, you know, covering her ass, CYA. And he doesn't. And Tuvok is not a team player. He's a dickhead, and I would have thrown his ass in the rig. Fuck him.
I mean, I get it. I get why. I mean, he doesn't give his name until they're done. And the whole temporal prime directive would suggest they don't even want to suggest that to him because he's a Romulan. He's a crafty fucking Romulan. He might put two and two together and be like, they're telling me that shit because I'm going to die.
I don't give a shit. You're like, if you're going to fucking violate the prime directive again and blow up the caregiver station and all the other stuff you've already fucked around with and cause problems, like what's one Romulan living an extra 4 years or whatever. And I get why they did it. And it was nice to see a sad ending to the episode, but just, man, Tuvok needs a slap in the mouth.
I mean, maybe I like that Tuvok was the one. Tuvok was wholeheartedly attempting to convince Janeway, like, perhaps it is that he sent it along in a will. Like, maybe the Klingons onto something here. Like, but it was too late.
Yeah,
it was
maybe
over.
You should have told me, motherfucker.
Janeway just says, "We're moving on," and that's the end of that of the A plot. That's the last we hear of it. We end on the B plot. And we get the second time around of douche bro workout guy coming in, kind of talking like the doctor's not there and disrespecting him. You know, total replay of the first scene. And the doctor stands up for himself. He asserts his authority as the chief medical officer. Tells the guy if he sees him again for these recurring sports injuries because he's not being careful, he's going to have words with his superior officer. Like there's going to be consequences and he needs to shape up and stop acting like an asshole. And the guy is immediately cowed by the toaster treating him like that, but says, yes, sir, of course, sir, and then leaves as soon as he's dismissed. And the doctor clearly takes a bit of pride in asserting himself and establishing his first steps towards an independent identity where he has agency.
Cool background that I read. Whatever the crew complement is supposed to be of the Maquis Starfleet crew, like whatever the people they have, they never exceed that number with the amount of extras that they show. So that guy eats one of the crew spots that they could possibly have for extra casting.
Yeah, I saw that in the Wikipedia article as well, that the number of people we see on screen, different faces, never exceeds what could potentially be on the ship. Now, given that's 140 plus, that's fortunately not a high bar to clear.
Sure.
But we do definitely have some recurring faces, some recurring extras. I think we mentioned Catcher Guy from the premiere. We see him a lot, like as a background extra. There's a couple of guys we've already seen that we'll continue to see.
The smoldering umpire.
The smoldering death glare umpire who does all of the background acting. They use those guest spot opportunities rarely for people as well. I mean, I think the only two celebrity guest spot crew members we ever see were the current King of Jordan, who's apparently a huge Star Trek fan. So when he was the Crown Prince, he ends up on the show, and then Tom Morello, the former bassist from Rage Against the Machine. They don't mess around too much with fritting away these opportunities.
So all in all, I'd have to say this is a 5 out of 5 episode. It was so good that in the end, when they do the big reveal in the transporter room that, this guy is from the past, like my eyes roll back and I'm like, of course, it's another fucking time travel episode. Again, 50% of the show that we've seen so far. But even that, it was such a huge part of the story, but it was not the end all be all of the story. Great character development, excellent direction, good pacing, good character development, and again, anything that can end on a bittersweet note in a Star Trek episode, I feel is a win for the right team. So very impressive. And if this would be all that we were dealing with from here out, I would be ecstatic.
This is almost the reverse of what we've watched so far. Like every complaint we've had about the show, this manages to do right. We get character development that really feels like it matters. We get great acting. We get great passion in performances. We get a clear, cohesive narrative structure. We get a very interesting space conundrum. They reuse the temporal thing for the third time, but it's done in a way that serves the story and not an excuse for the plot of the week. And it hits you. Obviously, I was spoiled on this because I've seen it before, so the intensity of the final gut punch wasn't as bad for me, but it was my wife's first time seeing it, and she was just, motherfucker. It really hits you at the end when you realize everything they've done has not mattered. And it turned, everything they thought, all their hopes and dreams are dashed literally in the last moment, and there's nothing they can do about it. They are helpless. And aside from minor complaints about Chakotay's dialogue in the conference room scene, I don't have a word of complaint. I consider this not only a fine example of the show and a great episode of Voyager, but a great episode of Star Trek in general. And I really enjoyed it.
Well, we'll see if that enjoyment lasts. What's the next episode in our queue?
Oh, my friend. Ex Post Facto is our next episode, and it is the episode where Tom Paris's sex crime proclivities, they come back to haunt him, Peter. And we get to experience the consequences for Tom's perversion.
I look forward to it. Well, let's go ahead and close it out here. I'm going to go with our rule of acquisition number 125. And I think this one fits perfectly for this episode. You can't make a deal if you're dead.
Oh, man. Maybe that's the rule that Janeway shouts as he beats the shit out of Tuvok before throwing him in the brig for not being a team player on this one.
I'm going to go ahead and make my prediction here. I'm going to say that this guy passed that Isolinian chip off onto his daughter, who he mentioned before. And I think that their message to Starfleet still gets received, even though this guy died.
I know the answer to that. Do you want me to spoil it?
No. I mean, we're going in this thing for the long haul. We'll get there eventually.
All right, man. I enjoyed reviewing a good one with you. Yeah. I did. I was wondering, once we got to a good one, would it be as much fun? It is, because we get to be hardcore nerds.
Yeah, this one ran a little longer. I think we're at an hour and 22 minutes here, so hopefully you guys are enjoying, the nerdy, deeper, introspective conversations as much as the the butt plug and jackrabbit.
Not as much shit in fucking this one. A lot of talk about, virtual intelligence versus artificial intelligence, but, hopefully still the content people crave. But until next time, I'm Joseph.
I'm Peter.
And this has been V'ger Please, a not this time hateful voyage through the Delta Quadrant.